Over the next 45 minutes, I'll be joined by two senior ministers in the Modi government. Ravi Shankar Prasad and Piyush Goyal will be joining us live on India Today to discuss the results of the India Today Mood of the Nation opinion poll. Let's get started and begin by looking first at what people across the country think of Prime Minister Modi's performance in the office and chair of Prime Minister. Let's take a look at the comparison between January 2017 and now July 2017. Remember, the Mood of the Nation opinion poll is done twice every year, once in the beginning and once around Independence Day. So here it is. The number of people who think the Prime Minister's performance has been outstanding has come down from 27% in January 2017 to 20% in July 2017. So a 7% fall here. Let's take a look at the number of people who think the Prime Minister's performance has been good. In January 2017, this figure was at 42%. It currently stands at 47%. So net-net, there's a slight decline in the number of people who think the Prime Minister has been good or outstanding. But the reality is, 3 years into his term as Prime Minister, a large majority, almost two-thirds of the respondents think he's either been good or he's been outstanding. After this, let's look at the number of people who think he's been poor or very poor. That figure stands at 12% now, vis-a-vis 9% in January 2017. Let's now see what people think is the Prime Minister's style of functioning. What are the key traits they attribute to him? Topping that list is the fact that people perceive the Prime Minister as being a risk taker. 24% think he's not afraid of taking risks. Remember, this figure was at 29% in January. It's come down by 5%, but still, that's his number one attribute. Troublesome for the Prime Minister is the fact that at number 2 is the suggestion that people think he's all talk and no action. 23% in July 2017 say he's all talk, no action. That figure was at 20% in January this year. 15% think he's pro-poor, whereas in January that figure stood at 17%. 12% think he's anti-minority. In January that was at 8%. 10% say he believes in Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. Essentially, there are two key things there. First, people think he's a risk taker, but at number 2, right below that top attribute, is the number of people who think he's all talk and no action. That's something which would be slightly disturbing for the Prime Minister. How satisfied are you with the performance of the NDA government? Here, if you look at plate 1, which really deals with what people think of the performance of the NDA government, 22% in January said they were very satisfied. That figure now down to 13%. Whereas if you look at the number of people who say they are satisfied, the figure earlier was at 49%. It's now at 46%. So the one thing for the government to look at is that the number of people who are either satisfied or very satisfied has come down from a total of 71% to 59%. Slight dip, but still he's already in stratosphere. So maybe one step lesser there. Now, how many people are not at all satisfied with the performance of the Modi Sarkar? Here in January, that figure was at 17%. It's now down to 12%. Those were totally dissatisfied. Whereas if you look at the number of people who are not at all satisfied, that figure was at 17%. It's now down to 5%. I want to bring in now some reactions from our guests, starting with India Today magazine's editorial director, Raj Chingappa. With us also on this broadcast at this time is Ajit Jha. He's editor research for India Today. He's led the team that's put this Mood of the Nation opinion poll together. And Javed Ansari, political analyst. Raj Chingappa, to you first. You know, the fact is, if you look at these overall big picture numbers, it seems India is still very rara Modi. People very happy with the way Prime Minister Modi is performing overall.
Rahul, you know, there are multiple messages that are coming through. Some very, very positive for Mr. Modi. They perceive him to be a decisive leader, strong-willed, and able to take, as we saw risky decisions, even though sometimes they could boomerang. But in this case, there's been demonetization that he's pushed through. There's been GST. Remember earlier, the surgical strikes against Pakistan. They believe that here is a leader that delivers on what he speaks about. And most importantly, I think if you look at some of the other figures on corruption, particularly because of demonetization, he comes through very, very well. One of the fundamental issues of this country has been corruption, and he's begun to address it in a large way, and that's why I think you're seeing the rewards. But there is this paradox in terms of what you saw, where lots of people still believe that he's all talk and no action, and this is a large message for Mr. Modi. If he has things to worry about, one is the job front, as you see the polls, and the fact that he needs to deliver on all the promises that he's made so far.
I want to go across now to Union Prime Minister Piyush Goyal. He's one of the key ministers in this Modi cabinet. He's joining us on this broadcast. One, the number of people, Minister, who believe that the Prime Minister has either been good or outstanding continues to remain very high. The one thing of concern, though, is that at number 2 in terms of the Prime Minister's attribute is the number of people who believe that he's all talk and no action. That figure going up from our previous polls, but net, Prime Minister Modi seems to be sailing in a stratosphere of his own.
Well, very clearly, Prime Minister Modi has emerged as one of the most popular Prime Ministers India has ever seen. The people of India are with him. There has never before been a situation where 3.5 years after the election, a leader's popularity has actually increased. The seats that his party or his coalition get have actually shown a growth. And very clearly, he stands tall amongst all the leaders. Your other point about some section of people not satisfied with his work, obviously in a country as large as India, some people are going to have issues. Some people are ideologically against the BJP, will continue to have their point of view. We should respect that. But if you see the overall total, most people seem to like one trait or the other about him.
Absolutely. Let's now take the minister and our viewers through what people believe are the biggest achievements of Prime Minister Modi. Coming in right at the top of the stack is the crackdown against black money. That's at 23%. Corruption-free government coming in at 14%. Demonetization coming in at 14%. The Swachh Bharat Abhiyan coming in at 11%. Surgical strikes coming in at 9%. So right at the top is the one message that's gone out very strong, Minister, that people perceive that there is a big crackdown on black money. Now, economists and some people would argue that, there is still black money, that, the recoveries haven't been very significant. But I think the message that's gone down all across the country is that this government is serious about tackling the menace of black money.
Well, clearly, Rahul, after 70 years of independence, we have a leader and a government which is seriously working to ensure a corruption-free regime, working to encourage people, more and more people, to get into the formal economy, bringing in regulatory reform, bringing in tax reform, so that more people are encouraged to pay their taxes honestly. Obviously, a 70-year legacy is not going to overnight get resolved, but you can very clearly feel the palpable change in the mood of the nation. Look at the number of people who have increased in the Provident Fund registrations, for example. The growth of almost 1.4 crore people who are now coming under the ambit of the Provident Fund organization. Look at the increasing numbers of taxpayers. Almost 56 lakh first-time new taxpayers this year. So very clearly the people of India are delighted that here is a leader who means business, who wants to change the way India has worked, who's bringing India in the world stage as an honest nation, as a nation whose government you can trust. And I think you can feel that difference in the amount of FDI that's flowing in. You can feel that difference when you talk to small young entrepreneurs, when they talk about the enthusiastic way they talk about their country now.
Let's take a look now at the next data set, which is to do with what people believe are the government's big lapses, big failures. Right on the top of that chart is lack of jobs. 25% say the inability to create jobs is the biggest failing of the Modi Sarkar. Coming in at number 2 is price rise, which, remember, for a long time hadn't been much of an issue for this government, but now inflation seems to be creeping up. Farmer suicides coming in at number 3, with 16% saying that's the biggest failure. Indo-Pak relations is at 9%. Mob lynching is at 8%. I also want to show you the next chart before getting a response from the minister. Has the government been able to create enough jobs? Because that seems to be the one pressure point, the one sore area. Here, 13% say yes, the government has been able to create jobs, but the far bigger number, 53% say no, 31% say the situation is the same, 53% say no, more jobs have not been created. Minister, 53% people believe that more jobs are not being created, and the maximum number of respondents seem to feel that your government's biggest failure is the inability to create new jobs.
Well, while we respect the findings of any such poll, and I'm sure all of us will also be looking at dissemination of more data points to the people, the fact is that the world is changing. We've had very senior distinguished economists come in from all over the world also and talk to us about the changing way dynamics in job market are changing all across the world. For example, today the entire concept of large factories, large power plants providing organized level jobs is changing to a more distributed network, is changing to more and more startups and job creation through entrepreneurship. And that change in mindset is happening all over the world, is happening in India. Today we were interacting with 212 young entrepreneurs, young CEOs, startup entrepreneurs. And the one message very clearly that came up was that young India today wants to be a job creator, wants to try his hand at something new, wants to be the master of his own destiny. So when you ask a question about a job, it usually refers to an organized sector or a government sector job. That is clearly not the way the country is going to move forward. India, as is the rest of the world, is taking major strides and major steps to become more and more a nation of entrepreneurs, a nation of business persons, a nation of people who are charting new territories, who are coming up with innovative ideas, and I think we should encourage that.
Stay with me, Minister. I also want to welcome now Senior Congress leader Dr. Abhishek Manu Singhvi. He's joining us. The one thing to look at, Dr. Singhvi, is 3 years into the term of Prime Minister Modi's government, his popularity seems to be soaring. A hashtag this evening is Namo Nation. There may be problems and areas of concern, but net-net, India seems to be enamored still with Prime Minister Modi and this BJP government.
Rahul, I won't repeat the usual caveats for such surveys. You may take them as given, and we've done it enough times in your and other channels for those caveats to be known. But I wanted to say that, you know, this whole hype as if the Big Bang, Earth and the global world started after Mr. Modi became a Prime Minister, that is something very disturbing. Everything appears to be happening only when Mr. Modi has become the Prime Minister onwards. Now, there are governments in the recent immediate past which have been governments of 10 years. There are Prime Ministers and party presidents whose popularity, and your own polls showed it, in 2008 and 9 were higher than when they started in 2004. So let's not think that in the third year or the fourth year of government you haven't had better figures. And not only have we had better figures, we've translated it into better two-term governments. Number two, I think the law of diminishing returns, Rahul, set in long ago. I'm not talking of your surveys, but in every area there is a feeling of disillusionment. There is a feeling clearly, and that also partly is brought out by your survey, but in much lesser measure, that cold hard statistics are literally a chasm away from the claims. I'll give you two very quick examples. They're only meant by way of example. Ashutosh Varshini, who's an independent, extremely well-known academic who wrote just 2 days ago in the Indian Express, said that the Prime Minister's repeated claim that by 2022, which is a new watershed year Mr. Modi has invented, farm incomes will double. He said so recently, he said so in the Independence Day thing, he said so many times. He calculates and says that in 5 years, for farm incomes to double, you need a 14% growth of agriculture per year. No country in the world has achieved that unless a country has started with zero agriculture and started with the first year. So 14% per year growth annum is something the Prime Minister has simply fed into the nation. No cross-check, no accountability. You will be astonished to know.
I get Piyush Goyal to respond to it, Dr. Singhvi, because the point that you're essentially making is no, one by one.
Just 1 minute more, half a minute more, 30 seconds more.
Okay.
30 seconds more. No, 30 seconds. Let me just give 30 seconds more. The figures given about employment, for example, does anybody tell you the figure that from January to April 2017, about 1.5 million jobs have been lost as in the aftermath of demonetization? Look, just because you won UP elections, a wrong economic policy decision, and nobody should know it better than Mr. Piyush Goyal, would remain wrong. A electoral success does not validate an economic error. And the bad effects of demonetization are flowing in a staggered manner every day. You find credit, you find
let the minister respond.
You find that climate falling, and you find 1.5 million jobs lost in the first quarter of this year.
That's the CMIE report. Center for Monitoring the Indian Economy says from January to April, there have been 1.5 million jobs lost. Mr. Piyush Goyal, do you want to respond to the point that the opposition makes, that you build this galaxy of expectations? Galaxy of expectations. He claims that some of them are simply unrealistic and cannot be met. Let the minister respond.
Well, one thing is for sure, that the people of India trust Prime Minister Modi. The people of India trust this team of Prime Minister Modi to deliver. And that is evident in every survey, every result that we've seen over the last 3.5 years. Point one. Point two, as far as the agricultural calculations that my good friend Abhishek Manu Singhvi is giving, is a very simplistic way of calculating, but also shows a deep sense of ignorance. Because agricultural income growth is not only about production growth or about MSP growing. It's about productivity. It's about better cash value crops growing. It's about better processing of your produce so that you can get a better income out of it. It's about how you can get better facilities for electricity, water, loan, all other input seeds which can help you increase your output. So it's a culmination of several factors. We are not working on a single track that you have to look at 14% growth alone. We are looking at 10 tracks through which the farmers' incomes will increase, and we are very confident of achieving that. Mr. Singhvi is free to have his own analysis or approach to the issue. We are more focused on performing on the ground rather than only discussing about numbers. As regards the job loss, I have just responded to your question earlier, that the organized job growth versus what the current day and age of new technology, fourth dimension of manufacturing, artificial intelligence, with newer ways of doing business, we are going to see a shift in the nature of employment. More and more people are going in for working opportunities. As regards demonetization, unfortunately, Mr. Singhvi cannot yet come to terms with the fact that we've been able to bring out a lot of money into the banking system, which will help the economy going forward. Data mining has helped us to locate who are the people, which are the companies which have not legitimately put in money into their accounts. We are able to detect where people have fudged their accounts. I think this is going to help the Indian economy with a great deal of better tax compliance going forward.
Dr. Singhvi,
demonetization has been good for India. The people of India recognize that, and I see this as a great positive for India.
Dr. Singhvi, one of the big takeaways from this poll is that the maximum number of people believe that the biggest achievement of this government is the crackdown on black money. And coming in at number 2 is that this is a corruption-free government, especially in comparison with UPA 2, which was infested with scams. One of the things that stands out when people look at this government of Prime Minister Modi is that they believe it's corruption-free and leading a big crackdown against black money. Dr. Singhvi.
I'll immediately answer your question, Rahul, but let me address two issues first, and I hope you'll give me almost equal time. You know, jargon and rhetoric cannot take the place of cold hard figures. When you quote cold hard figures of independent agencies, you cannot fudge in terms of big words, entrepreneurship, multiple other means of seed to farm, or startups, or multiple different ways. There are established ways of measuring jobs. That doesn't change because there's a BJP government, so you have a fancy new measurement technique, and when other governments are there, you measure jobs with in another system. This is CMEI. It is not BJP, it is not me. Surely an institution which has been there for decades is not pointing out false data. This is only one facet of a wrong disastrous economic decision remaining disastrous. And equally, Ashutosh Varshini is an academic. Simple calculation tells you that farm incomes to double in 5 years require a 14% growth rate. However much you will jargonize it, that fact remains unalterable. As far as black money and corruption is concerned, the real hard fact is that demonetization has already led to a 26,000 crore reduction in the dividend which RBI pays the government of India. That is what the finance minister gets less because of demonetization. He may not like to admit it because he'd lose his job because the Prime Minister did the demonetization. 13,000 crores of that was to print new notes. The RBI is still counting. We don't know how long they'll count. We wonder how the Prime Minister gets his figures that the money which has come back is black money. Nobody has said so yet. There is a complete contradiction. The RBI says we are counting, the Prime Minister says we've solved the problem, we've cracked the code. As far as corruption is concerned, I think the BJP government and the BJP president and the NDA government tends to think that Mr. Raman Singh is not part of the BJP, that Madhya Pradesh, Mr. Shivraj Singh Chauhan, a multi-state scam of Vyapam, is not part of the BJP ruled state, and the multiple scams tumbling out of my home state of Rajasthan, that's not part of a BJP government. So this is selective amnesia. I do agree, I've always said that here is a Prime Minister whose oratorical abilities, his oratory is mesmerizing. I compliment him for that. But the law of diminishing returns sets in long ago on such oratory. It has to be backed by real figures. There are a huge number of scams going on in the states. You have reported it. Are they not corruption issues? But yes, when action is taken, it is selective. There I agree with you. And therefore the picture painted is that everybody except BJP chief ministers, BJP high functionaries are corrupt. But the BJP high functionaries are not. This is selectivity, malafides at its worst.
Okay, I want to show our viewers now what respondents in this survey feel about demonetization, since demonetization is being spoken about. Here are the India Today Karvi responses. 13% of the respondents say demonetization caused some pain but curbed black money. That's at 13%. 6% say it caused some pain but led to less corruption. 13% say both of the above options are true, that it caused some pain but it curbed black money or corruption. 11% say it destroyed all businesses. 15% say it led to loss of jobs. 13% say it badly impacted farmers. 22% say all of the above. Minister, when you look at the breakup of demonetization, it's throwing up a mixed picture. While you've got 32% respondents believing that it's been good for India, a larger percentage of the respondents seem to believe that demonetization has destroyed businesses, loss of jobs, impacted farmers, or all of the above. So India in this poll, while it's convinced about how good Prime Minister Modi is, doesn't seem fully convinced about whether demonetization was more pain or gain. Minister Piyush Goyal.
Well, I think we'll have to give out more details. Let the data mining be over. Let the amounts that have come into the banks be verified for their authenticity, for the nature of money that has come into the banks. As more data comes out, I'm sure the people of India will realize the far-reaching implications and the benefits that demonetization has got the nation. You can already see the interest rates falling post-demonetization. You have already seen that I think more than 3 lakh crores worth of deposits are under scrutiny for their authenticity, for the fact whether they've been tax-paid money. What Mr. Singhvi is talking about, figures are not out. That's the figure of money which has not got back to the RBI. They need to count that and calculate that and come up with that figure. We are all waiting for that. But as far as the money that has come into the banking system, the nature of that money and whether that also has some unaccounted money will help us really get the final results out. And I'm sure the people of India are patient. They've taken the whole demonetization very patiently. After all of that, and despite these numbers that you gave, if the BJP continues to grow from strength to strength, the NDA numbers are looking good. BJP itself vote percentage has gone up between your last survey in January, which was at the peak of the goodwill of demonetization, to now. BJP's vote percentage still goes up. The number of seats we have is still around 300. I think the people of India are willing to give, understand and wait for the final results of demonetization to come out.
I'm going to leave it over there. Minister Piyush Goyal, Dr. Abhishek Singhvi for joining us on part 1 of the newsroom this evening. Thank you very much. What we're going to do is slip into a very quick break. When we come back, we'll have Ravi Shankar Prasad join us. We'll also put out the big ticket numbers. We've got Ajit Jha, Raj Chingappa, Javed Ansari in the studios. We will distill some of the points that are coming up, because is demonetization indeed being perceived well? Most importantly, what will happen if elections are held right now? And what do people think is going to be the alternative to Prime Minister Modi? Who do they think could take over once he's done? There are long innings to go, but what happens next? All those questions and more will be answered in this India Today Mood of the Nation opinion poll when we come back on the other side of a quick break. Stay with us.